Welcome back to the BestWorst21 podcast. I'm your host, Josh William. Today's a very special episode, and I'm really excited about the conversation we're about to hear. You may have seen it on social media, but I have with me two amazing leaders who I admire so greatly, and I just want to introduce them real quickly before we jump into the conversation. Dr. Jill Stratton is the Assistant Provost for Experiential Learning and Associate Dean of Residential Colleges at Vanderbilt University. And with over 27 years experience in higher education, she's done some wonderful things and impacted so many young people's lives and actually professionals within the world of higher education. She started her career at Washington University in St. Louis and has held many leadership and faculty roles throughout and since that time. I also have Orv Kimbrough, who is the chairman and CEO of Midwest BankCentre. Prior to his career in banking, Orv served as the president and CEO of the United Way of Greater St. Louis, on top of a long career of nonprofit and community engagement, leadership, and arenas. Both of these guests have unique stories, and yet they share this really amazing bond that I know that we'll pick up on in today's interview when their dedicated pursuit to really helping develop this next generation of leaders and really expanding the world of current leaders in various industries. Welcome, Jill and Orv.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. So good to be here today.
That's good. Well, I know that you two, I really look up to you two so much, and I've had a chance to get to know you in different capacities. What I've really been excited about was getting a chance to hear about some of the work that you're doing together. So maybe let's just start there and talk about your current roles and then how the two of you got together and started collaborating.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in, but I think interestingly enough, both of us are in kind of some new roles. As Josh, you mentioned, I spent the last 27 years at Washington University in St. Louis. And as of June 1, I started a new role at Vanderbilt University. And I always think, for me, it was certainly a leap. And I'm curious to hear Orv's take on his leap. And before we both took a leap, we actually taught a course at the Brown School in their leadership certificate program. And I want to talk a little bit about how we got connected, but that's a little bit about my leap. And Orv, I'm curious how you would describe your leap.
Yeah, my leap was a tremendous act of faith. I transitioned from United Way just about 2 years ago and moved into all things banking. And it's been an extraordinary journey, an extraordinary process of learning. Jill, one of the questions that I often get when people hear that I studied social work, I'm a social worker by heart, but I also studied some other areas, but I really consider myself a social worker. And they say, well, what is a social worker doing leading a bank? And the only way that I can describe it that makes sense, I think, to most people is I've spent 20 years of my life from a career standpoint focusing on building and nurturing human capital. And human capital is about the skills and the knowledge and the experience that we as human beings need to put in place to thrive, but also social capital. And social capital is really about the relationships and the networks that we need to thrive as individuals. And what I found is those two elements are so important to success, but also to communities that I care most deeply about. Financial capital is important and often missing in the equation. So when I got a chance to move from being on the board of the bank to actually leading the bank, it gave me an opportunity to put into practice so many things that I have been thinking about as it relates to just giving access to capital. So it's been an incredible ride. But going back to that social capital piece, Dean of Joy, you want to talk about how we met?
Yes, I do. That's funny that you call me the Dean of Joy, because I got that name from students at Washington University. In academia, Josh, as you know, they try to give these long titles that none of us sometimes can even remember. A few years back, some students were trying to introduce me at WashU, and they're like, "This is Dean Stratton. She's the Dean of Joy," and that kind of stuck. But I guess, Orv, it was probably a couple years ago, and we met about 10 years ago, but I had the opportunity to do some consulting with you at the United Way and work with your groups, and we got to know each other. And Dean Mary McKay and Janet Gillow from the Brown School approached me about teaching in the postmaster certificate program on developing and leading teams. And I was thinking about, who would I want to join me on that journey? Because I think all of us are smarter and more creative than one of us. And the Brown School, Josh, as you know, is such a leader in community connections and community partnerships. So I thought about it. I said, yes, I'd be honored to teach in this inaugural program. And I'd really like to have an idea about teaming up with a community partner. And they said, well, who would that be? And I said, Orv Kimbrough. And I remember, I think it was Janet who said, you and Orv Kimbrough? That's the dream team. But then she said immediately, well, I don't know if you can get him. He's pretty busy. And I said, can I ask him? And she's like, yeah, she got the green light from Dean McKay. And Orv, I don't know if you remember this, but I said, I have this opportunity to teach in this program. And you are the number one person that I want to teach and partner with. And I said, please don't say yes or no. I said, but I would do backflips to work with you. And you're like, send me all the information. And literally, Josh, one day later, I got an email back from Orv. And he says, dear Jill, I have 2 words for you. I'm in.
Yeah.
And Orv, I think, I don't know if you want to talk about what that means to you, but we've taught one session of that program, and then we're kind of in the middle of the second one. And I will tell you, Josh, when Orv says he's all in, he was in.
So the reason that, Josh, I was able to say yes so quickly is because I trusted Jill, and I trusted her preparation, and she does nothing half-hearted. And so the idea of being in from a leadership standpoint, from a community standpoint, is simply to be fully committed. It's amazing when you engage with people who are fully committed, you typically become fully committed. If you engage with people who are lukewarm, then it's hard for you to it's hard for you to burn bright. And so I'm in. It simply acknowledges this commitment, and that we were going to be on a journey. But I trusted her, and I trusted her expertise. And she did say to me, don't answer it now, because I've had time to process this. I think when you're busy, your inclination is to say, my cup runneth over. And in the moment, you say no. And what she was doing was to give space and time for me to think about it, and for me to think about the contribution that the 2 of us teamed up could make on helping to shape future leaders. I was told by a leader in St. Louis, and during the period that I was in discernment about the class, I was reminded of what this past leader said to me. She said, if you want to get something done, engage a busy person.
Yep.
Well, we both know Jill very well, and somehow some people can say that that's potentially true. Although I know Jill wouldn't use the word busy, but
yeah, absolutely. I call that the B word. I always challenge people, please try not to say busy for the next week. I like to say I had an ambitious week. Full on. But yeah, and Josh, we had a mentor, Dean Jim McLeod. When people would say, I'm so busy, Dean McLeod would say, what are you busy about? And I have to say, Orv, yes, you have a full schedule, but you are always busy about what matters most. And that's what I've been drawn to you and your leadership. And I think, again, when you're working with, when you're partnering with somebody that you trust, somebody that you inspire, it takes your leadership to the next level.
Absolutely. So you both have used that word trust, which it kind of stands out to me. And for me, I'm also hearing this idea of I'm in being about, really a statement of commitment. I also want to give a couple other reflections as well. Or if you talked about kind of building this human and social capital, even though your industry focuses on financial capital, but the idea that all those areas are important to thrive. But let's just go back to the partnership between the two of you. So clearly this is a foundation of trust. And I think that's critical for any relationship, working or otherwise, to get done. And there has to be some level of commitment. And so you both bring that to the table, but you both are very different, right? You both have very different backgrounds and industries in so many ways. And so I'm kind of curious about how the two of you, who on paper, and even literally looking at you from all of the identity perspectives can be so different, but how the two of you have been able to form a relationship that works to really do some powerful work in engaging people and growing their potential for leadership and making a difference and being a contribution in the world.
One of the things that strikes me about Jill, she introduced me to this concept of name and story, and on paper we might look completely different. Actually, physically we look different.
You're better looking than I am.
But,
oh
no, not yeah. But name and story, and so when you get to know name. And I say name and story, but story is narrative. Mm-hmm. You find that there are so many human motivations that are aligned. And so I think both Jill and I seek to be excellent. And to be excellent is not to be perfect. Both Jill and I recognize that as humans, we are broken, but at the same time, we recognize that as humans, we have the ability to speak life into each other.
No, that's, and when I first met Orv and did some work with him with the United Way and his team, I was so, Josh, one of the things I love the most about leaders, there's two important qualities, I think, of great leaders. And one of them is brilliance. And Orv certainly had the brilliance piece. The second, and that's sometimes not uncommon in great leaders, right? But the second thing that he had, Josh, was humility. And those two together, brilliance and humility, are very rare, but the humility helps the brilliance shine brighter. And so Orv was always like that from a servant leadership standpoint. It wasn't about him. It was always about the organization. It's always about the people. So I thought in terms of partnering on this postmaster certificate program, when we co-created that, we wanted that to be a co-created experience with the people that we were serving, which was teaching, but we're also learning from them. And then, Orv, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but, Josh, when you talk about our partnership, I mean, one of the things, again, that I admire about Orv is his vulnerability. So he was stepping into this brand new job as president of a bank and was able to reflect during our class. He would share in authentic, real ways. He was modeling authentic leadership through vulnerability. And the thing about leadership, it's hard work, right? And it's heart work. It's about our names, our stories, our humanities, our experiences. And so I think Orv and I were able to really collaborate with one another on that based on our trust, based on our alignment of our values and what we believe in, but also hopefully to bring that out in the people that we were teaching and learning with.
I think, one of the things we often said in the class is leadership is about more than technical competence. And when I transitioned into the bank, I try to articulate that. And sometimes we are judged solely on our technical competence. But technical competence doesn't help you navigate the current crisis that we are navigating in our country, whether it's the social crisis, whether it's the health crisis, whether it's the financial crisis. And so when Jill mentioned here a second ago, just this idea of servant leadership, we talk extensively about servant leadership. And the first principle of servant leadership is listening deeply. Yeah. The second principle is empathy. It's seeing the issue from the other person's point of view. It's about healing. It's about self-awareness, which comes back to this idea of knowing thyself. Yes. It is about persuasion, but from a faith standpoint, not a fear standpoint. So in other words, how you use your influence. And so all of these things are aspects of what we've covered in the class. And, Jill, just this idea of vulnerability is to say, you know what, I don't have the technical competence. I don't get it all. I don't understand it all. But then being open to curating the right people in your life that helps to shore you up.
Thank you so much. I in my mind, that last section right there, when I listen to podcasts, I always hit rewind, like the 30-second mark or the 30 seconds when I hear some things that stand out. And I'm like, I need to listen to that 2 or 3 more times. And let me just tell you a few of those that I guarantee I'm going to be hitting the 30-second button on. This idea of excellence not equaling perfection, and that's not needed for leadership. The idea of being broken, but having the ability to speak life into people and to things. Jill, your idea, your breakdown of brilliance and humility, that unique and interesting balance. And if aspiring leaders out there can strike that balance of accepting and owning their brilliance, but being able to have some humility with it and openness, sounds really amazing. And then this idea that leadership is greater than technical competence or technical skills. And I think that, again, for folks who are paying attention and listening to this right now, as you look at your leadership journey or your current leadership role, I hope that you're really paying attention to that. And faith, not fear. I'm going to hold on to that big time. So I'm going to really talk about just kind of, you both represent different industries, of course, or previously nonprofit, now banking, and of course the business industry, and Jill, of course, higher education. We often go into these organizations where they have a mission that's connected to these organizations. And so I understand that groups and individuals have missions that help them define their purpose, like why they're there to do what they're doing. And so for you two, if you could describe how you would define your missions and how did you form your personal mission?
That's such a great story. I mean, a great question. And I think my mission is, on some level, it's always anchored in one thing, but it's always evolving, right? It's contextual. But when I came to Washington University in 1993, I was introduced to this concept of leaving places cleaner than we found them, but it became bigger. It became leaving people and places better than we found them. Because really, ultimately, leadership is relational. It's about the people, or that you talked about, that we're serving, that we're teaching, that we're in the service of. It's getting to know people by name and story. And that came from Dean Jim McLeod. That we, when we know people's stories, we know their humanity. And as Orv mentioned, we are in a crisis right now where we're so polarized and that we're not deeply listening. And I think, that empathy and that listening, and when you know somebody's story, you cannot dismiss their humanity. And that is really the bedrock of my leadership, is getting to know people by name and story in order to help them bring their greatest gifts, because we need everybody's strengths. Yes. We need that. And then also, at the end of the day, I have a great friend named Jenna Limbo. Josh, you've met her. She's a musician in Asheville, North Carolina. And she says she went through a really hard time in her life in her early 20s, lost 3 people really close to her, and really pushed the pause button, says, if we have limited time on this planet, and we do, what are we doing with it, and who are we spending it with? So for me, it's really living. I mean, it may sound morbid, and I don't mean it this way, but it really creates my meaning. If I live daily with my death in front of me, it makes it really crystal clear what matters. And so it brings kind of a centering to my leadership, a centering to my life. Or you talked about know thyself, and that really helps me stay humble and stay focused. So Josh, I know that was a very long-winded answer to my mission, but that's really, it's really all about the people that I'm serving and the contributions and strengths I want to bring to this world while I'm here.
It's perfect.
I think that's a mic drop.
Just end it right there.
I think what you just said is so powerful, and it is inspiring. For me, Josh, my mission has never changed. I grew up in the foster care system. I aged out of the foster care system, so I spent my formative years with the state of Missouri as my parent, and that was a defining moment for me. And so my mission for as long as I can remember has been to create conditions to help people live better lives. I've joined organizations where I have felt like I can leverage my influence to do that. My mission has always been about helping people dream bigger, or to resuscitate a dream. My mission has always been about others and being other focused, because I do understand the basic principle that when you are other focused, when you are about helping people achieve things that they may not believe that they can achieve in their own strength, that's a way of giving back to the universe, and good things happen to you as a result of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that really runs counter to some narratives that are happening. Or you used the word narrative earlier. And I think it's important for people to hear this narrative and be reminded of what true success looks like. This idea of really focusing on others. And both of your missions are really centered around the idea of leaving people, taking care of others, improving other people's plights and situations. And they come from some very powerful places. I really want to go back to this concept of I'm in. That's a conversation I know the three of us had earlier. And Jill, you kind of described it wonderfully in describing Orv's commitment to working with you. And so I want to kind of explore the idea of that commitment I'm in a little bit more. And so if each of you can share with me, what does it look like to be committed? What does it look like for you to say I'm in? How does that show up for you?
So I'm in is this notion that I want to be united to people and not divided from them. We are in an incredibly polarized time right now. And I yearn for connection. I yearn for connectivity. And I think sometimes we, as human beings, we forsake that. And to be connected and to have connectivity doesn't mean that you have to be in agreement with everything. But if you are in disagreement with everything, I just find that it's just a challenging way to live. So I'm in goes back to this idea that I'm going to be vulnerable with you, and I'm going to acknowledge that I have not exhausted all knowledge on all topics.
That's right.
That's your humility. I mean, that really is part of your humility.
I feel like the world needs a huge helping teaspoon. If we haven't got it by this, all that we're dealing with right now, we're not paying attention. We're not
maybe more than a teaspoon, but no, you're
Maybe
right.
more.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. And when Orv says he's all in, I will say, especially as it relates to that class, that it was 45 hours that we put together on 3 different weekends, and Orv was so committed. He was all in terms of his teaching, his research, his. And I know he did that when he joined the bank. I mean, it wasn't that he joined the bank as like, kind of a outside consultant or a marketing director. He joined the bank as CEO and president. He was all in, and he took coursework. I mean, he really models that being all in. And really, I think another part of great leadership is asking those questions. And Orv, you talked about being a deep, deep listener and getting curious and asking questions, and being all in is really, it's about one of my mentors, Parker Palmer, has a book called Let Your Life Speak. And I kind of always wanted to write a kind of a follow-up to that, a companion book, Let Your Life Listen. Mm-hmm. And Orv, I think being all in it's listening to our strengths, it's listening to our mentors, it's listening to kind of like our, chasing our internal dreams as opposed to like chasing all the external. And I think, Josh, that's where the thread of humility comes in. I want to talk a little bit about being all in, but I want a variation on a theme. And I want to talk about calling people in. And Orv, you mentioned that we are living in a very polarized, I can't imagine a more polarized time. And we're in this, Josh, this cancel culture. You hear it like somebody says something, you're like, I'm canceling them. They're out. And for me as a white person, I've heard some of my friends, some of my Black friends in particular say, Jill, it's really convenient when white people cancel each other out. It's more work for us. So can you all stay in the arena a little bit longer with each other? And one example that came from a class that I taught a few years ago at Washington University, I taught a class called Bad Leadership. Of course, they say you teach what you know. So there I was. Thank you for that opportunity. It was a group of first-year students in a fairly small class. And one of the students said something that I considered a microaggression. The other students in the room also did. And I thought, okay, I'm teaching leadership. They're going to come forward. They're going to address it. It was crickets. Not one student said a word. So I really felt like as the teacher and the leader that I needed to intervene. So I was very honest. I was vulnerable, but authentic. And I just named what happened. And the student who made the microaggression, the statement, he apologized appropriately. He really did. That is when the student became the teacher, because the student said, Dean Stratton, I've heard recently about people calling people out. And now I've been thinking about it differently, about calling people in. And I really like that, that reframe, because again, calling people out can tend to maybe be a cancel culture type of situation. We're calling people in, or if it goes back to our idea of trust and vulnerability. And I think sometimes that from a leadership perspective, that may only work when we have that trust of that intact team, and we have that. It's hard to call people in on anonymous comments on social media. That doesn't quite work. But I really, I love that reframe. So it's like, I'm all in because I care about you from a relationship standpoint. And I'm going to call you in and be vulnerable and have those hard conversations because it is worth it. You are worth it. We are worth it.
Yeah, I think, both the calling people in and the idea that I am all in is all about human connection. And it also creates the conditions for human flourishing. I think about what you just said from the standpoint of being radically hospitable. It's this idea that we are invitational.
Yes.
It's the idea that we are welcoming. It's the idea that we are receiving our neighbor even when our neighbor has pained us.
Mm-hmm.
And to our neighbor who has pained us, it is simply personalizing it. It is saying, when you said X, this is how it made me feel.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of radical hospitality, Joe, I'd love to hear your take on that, because I know that's something that the two of you both share quite a bit about. So what's your take on radical hospitality?
Well, first of all, I love it. I love the concept of radical hospitality. It converges a couple of different ways for me. It means that wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome here. And I think from a leadership perspective, an educational standpoint, human connection, or have you talked about how we welcome people is really, I think that reflects our values. And so welcoming everybody, my friend Carrie Newcomer, singer-songwriter, has a great song called There's Room at the Table. And there's room at the table for everybody. Sometimes we look at, we look at it as from a deficit model. If I have this power, or if I have this, then you can't have it. And I really see it as much more circular than that. And also that we need everybody's strengths. We need everybody's, we have problems in our country. Or if you name some of them, but we've got problems around climate, poverty, polarization. We need everybody at the table with their strengths and their gifts and really, and also, that people are seen and that they are heard and they are valued. And, or if you talked about human flourishing, people thrive when they feel not that they're tolerated or not that, that they are welcomed and they are celebrated. And so I feel like, again, being part of a university community, being part of a business, being part of a family, that we welcome people and see strengths in our differences, that we see strengths in that. We're not threatened by that. And I think that that's really what I see, like radical hospitality. We are called to do that as leaders, and we are called to do that as human beings.
Yeah, John Quincy Adams, he has this quote, if your actions inspire people to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and become more, you are a leader. And I think that quote is so powerful. And I think radical hospitality inspires people to dream more. It inspires people to tap into the better angels of our nature. That idea of radical hospitality, the very thought that you would engage someone who has pained you, can't do anything but inspire people to learn more. And this learning is this idea of self-exploration. It's self-awareness, becoming aware of self. And when you become aware of self, you actually can become more.
One of the things that I'm kind of picking up from both of you is a lot of self-reflection and consideration of your experiences and your awareness and how you can really improve the experience of others around you. And I find it so moving and so inspiring. This idea of radical hospitality based on the idea of being able to build relationships. Jill, you're one of the best relationship developers I know. We've had, rides on planes together where you've made friends with strangers. I've taken a nap while you've flown on the planes and not surface plane relationships, but continue to stay connected to people well beyond those interactions. But I want to also just put a fine point on this idea of I am in. I remember in our previous conversations, I'm in is a true commitment to humankind, right? It's a commitment to the people around us and to making the world better. And, commitment isn't, we joked around about So people don't even commit in their marriages. They divorce, but I was moved by the two of you. As you look at this world that may look like it's on fire at times, it may look like we have so much strife and disagreement, but that we are committed to something that the potential of what this country can be and what this world can be. And it really inspired me to be more committed to this country and to the world around me. Mm-hmm, and so, I'm in too, and I that's why I'm a big fan of the two of you. And I'll probably run through a brick wall for the two of you, but before that, I'll support whatever it is that you're trying to do because I'm in as well. Before we get to our big question, I just have one more question for you, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break, just a short pause. So you both are dealing with such a wide variety of people, whether it's in your current roles or throughout your year, and so this idea of inclusive leadership is I think really directly connected to this, right? I mean, the idea that, Jill, there's no doubt that your friend group looks so different than you, and similarly, and same Orv, I assume the same thing for you. And so how do you pull people in? How do you develop relationships? How do you demonstrate inclusive leadership where all voices can be heard and connected and feel empowered?
So I once told somebody that when I was working at United Way, that United Way was like a port organization. And he said, well, Orv, what does that mean? I said, think about the history of ports. These places where they are exposed to so many different people who come in and out. Port cities are places where new ideas are transmitted more quickly than if you were rural. And because of my background with United Way, or my academic study, or the organizations that I've worked for, or the relationships that I have been intentional about in college, being intentional about being in environments and with people who look and who think differently than I can't help but to foster inclusive leadership. And the idea of inclusive leadership is one that even if we look the same, we have two completely different narratives. And it's acknowledging that individuals should be encouraged to bring their whole selves into the relationship. And so, if I were to think about this from just the bank standpoint, we try to encourage people to bring their difference, and we are richer as an organization. I am richer as a human being for your difference.
Excellent.
Yeah, and for me, it reminds me a lot of when I think about this work of inclusion and equity and diversity, that it is, for me, it's the work of our lifetime. And being a teacher and being a learner and being a citizen, that, and especially in the light of what's happened in our own country in the last several months, that for me, especially as a white person, it's important for me to speak truth to power. The small amount of power that I do have, that I'm using power for good, that I am asking curious questions, or like you said, that I am listening, that I am surrounding myself with bold thinkers that challenge me, that are calling me in. And I think that's really important. And that, that for me, it's also just part of, it's a core value of who I am. And I can state that out loud, but I have to live it. That we know that our policies are shaped by our values, our budgets, our moral documents, the language that we use. I have two nieces that are 5, and Kate will be 7 soon, and I have a nephew who's 11. And in this moment of time, Josh, 30 years from now, when they are grown adults. I don't want them to question, well, what did Aunt Jill do during this time? How did Aunt Jill feel about social justice and equity? I want it to be crystal clear to them and all the people that are around me. I think we can have a whole other episode on that. And Josh, I know you're committed to that work. I know Orv, you are. And for me, it's remaining humble and in the arena and knowing that this is the work of our lifetime.
That's perfect. So we're going to take a really short break, and then we're going to get to just a final wrap-up question and go from there. All right, so I know we're getting ready to go kind of round 3 here, and I'm super excited to hear some of your stories. I just want to say that for folks who are listening, run this one back 2 times, 3 times. I think you're gonna, again, you missed it. Trust me, there's quite a number of really incredible jewels here in this conversation. So thank you both, Orv and Jill. So of course, this podcast is the BestWorst podcast is about resilience and this idea of resilience. And so the two of you have had these wildly successful careers. At least that's how I take it. And please, I hope that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. But I see you two as very successful in your respective careers and your career trajectories. But I know that path couldn't have been easy for either of you. And so the bigger question here for this version of the episode, of course, is what does it mean for you, the two of you, to be resilient? And in fact, if you want to, you could share a personal example, whether it's personal or professional, where you went through something that you had to demonstrate resilience and kind of what that takeaway could be for listeners.
So your question is intriguing. You said, you guys, you two have been very successful. I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl, and he said, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself." And I have been chasing not success, but I've been chasing significance and meaning to all of the challenges that I've had, the things that I have gone through as a young person. The first time I heard the idea of resilience, I was sitting in a social work class, and it was an introductory class. And the short of what I heard was, resilience is this idea that you bend but do not break. And I reflected on that observation because I scored a 15 on the ACT. I had a young person some years back, I shared with him, I scored a 15 on the ACT, and he looks at me and he said, "Well, did you sign your name?" And so as I was reflecting on that idea, bend but do not break, I was thinking, I am at university. I scored a 15 on the ACT. Mm-hmm. And so there's this idea of resilience is, it's about persistence, and it's about finding meaning in your struggle. So if you don't find meaning in the setback, You won't use the setback for a setup to take you to the next level of significance. And so resilience is finding meaning in the pain. So you've got to sometimes say, why me, Lord? It's finding meaning. And if you can find meaning, you can be hopeful. When you lose hope, you lose life.
Well, that is a mic drop moment for me. And I'm going to listen to what Orv said. And that's why, Josh, you can probably tell why I love partnering and co-teaching and with Orv, but also not only from a professional standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, having him in my life that gives me hope. So, you mentioned that, or maybe I mentioned that I teach positive psychology. That's part of my research. The last 10 years, I've been really studying happiness, what makes people happy. And as you know, the students call me the Dean of Joy. So a few years ago, a student said, does the Dean of Joy ever get sad? And well, the short answer to that is yes, she does, because it's not if hard things happen to us, if we're walking a human path, it's when. We hold both the joy and sadness of this one wild, precious life. And so, Josh, when you talk about resilience, there's been so many examples. I think all three of us could share that out. But I guess the one story I wanted to share is a story about my mom, who actually really, to me, just embodies what resilience means. It doesn't mean that when hard or sad things happen that we bury them, because if we numb ourselves to the sadness, then we'll numb ourselves to the joy. But what resilience means, and Orv, I love what you said, that there's meaning in the struggle, that we bounce back a little bit more quickly and we adapt and we look at that for what it is. So my mom is a 2-time cancer survivor. She had colon cancer in her mid-30s. She's now 74. And so she went through that. I was fairly young at the time, but about, 8-9 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's. I was actually at the doctor's office when she was diagnosed, and that is a chronic disease with no cure. We walk out of the doctor's office, and I asked my mom, I said, Mom, how do you feel? And my mom said, well, I felt like the same way I felt when they told me I had colon cancer. Now, I wasn't with her at that time because I was much younger. So I said, well, how did you feel? Now, my mom, Alice Stratton, is a good Southern woman from, Josh, you've met her. She's from Kentucky. Never said a curse word in her life. So my mom said, well, when they told me this, she said, I thought to myself, well, darn.
Wow.
Well, darn.
Yep.
But then within a couple of minutes, she says to me, now, what do I have to do? So I think my mom in that moment, Josh, she demonstrated resilience. She acknowledged that sadness, that struggle, that pain, or that, and she's 74, and she, and there's been some setbacks. But I admire my mom so much. And then, Orv, what you said, there is meaning in the struggle, and there's purpose behind that. And I think about this notion of critical hope. Brittany Packnett Cunningham, Josh, a WashU alum and mentor and leader in the world right now. She talks about not like Hallmark hope, but critical hope, whether that's around issues of social justice, around pain, around our own setbacks. And I think I guess it just all comes full circle, that it's easier to do those kinds of things when you've got people in your life that you love and people that you trust. And, Orv and Josh, you're two of those people in my life. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, that it's a lot easier not to go this alone.
Well, I appreciate the both of you for sharing that. Again, so much there. Orv, you said, you lose hope, you lose life. And I think that's a very powerful statement. And Jill, I know you co-sign on this idea of finding meaning in your struggle and, even finding meaning in your pain. I think that could be, when you're going through it, nobody, you don't want to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But the beautiful thing about this is when you say those words to people, right? You need to find meaning in your struggle. You need to find meaning in your pain. Even if it doesn't sink in right away, when they need it, they have it. And I think that's the beautiful thing, that the two of you are willing to come forward in a platform like this or other venues to share these words, because I think they're important words. I just want to say one other thing before I kind of close out and have you share the best ways to get a hold of the two of you, is that, this whole podcast idea and framing came around the conversation with Jill Stratton. Folks, this is the Jill Stratton, who asked me that critical question when I went through a particular difficult time in my life. As Jill said, one of many, but one that was really significant. Why is this the best thing that could happen to you in your life? And Orv, that points exactly to what you said. Jill challenged me to figure out where the meaning was in that pain that I was going through in a time that I couldn't hear it. And actually, it took me years to call upon Jill's words, which I know she's constantly said that those are not her words. She passed them along. So I can appreciate that, but she at least passed them along. And so I appreciate the two of you taking this time to use your voices to share so much strength and light and hope, for the listeners. So for the two of you, what's the best way people can follow you? I don't know if you're Instagram influencers or anything like that, but if there's a website or an email or anything that you'd like for people to find you, what's the best way?
Yeah, well, I am on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, Jill Stratton, and on Twitter. But if people wanted to reach out personally, it's jill.stratton@gmail.com. I'd be happy to talk with anybody. I love, Josh, I love meeting new people and connecting. And if I can help in any way, I'd be happy to do that.
I'm on all social media platforms, Josh. I've got a Twitter handle. It's just my name, @Orv Kimbrough. I have a blog called Reimagining Our Future. I'm also launching in the next several weeks a newer blog called The Accidental Banker.
Excellent. That's perfect. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you too.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you for listening to the Best Worst Thing podcast. I'm your host, Josh William. Music is produced by Josh One. You can follow him at Boomnote on Instagram and Twitter, and Josh One on Spotify. Our episodes are edited by Cool Jets Audio and Visual. You can follow them at CoolJetsAV on Instagram. Our marketing is designed by Francesca Daniels. You can find her at FrankandKitty24 on Instagram. And our overall design is by Inspired Design with Ryan Daniels. You can find them at getinspired.design on Instagram. Thank you for listening to The Best Worst Thing.
This one's for the good times and this one's for the bad.